Chair Tanaka,
Here.
Councilmember Lowy,
Here.
Councilmember Vinker is absent. We have two present. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Oh, are we on TV? Are we on video?
Oh, actually, you're right. I don't see the light on.
We don't have the light on yet. There we go.
Okay, we're
You want to
live.
redo the roll call?
Do we need to?
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so we're calling the meeting to order. The first item here is public comment. Is there any members of the public who wish to speak? Clerk, is there anyone online or any cards submitted?
Chair, we have no request to speak.
Okay, so we're going to close public comment and we're on to our first action item. The first action item is approval of the following changes to scope, compensation, and/or time. 1A is approval of Office of City Auditor Task Order changes for the automatic license plate readers. Next one is the disaster recovery, and the next one is citywide risk assessment. Does the auditor have any things you'd like to say before we talk about this item?
Yes, all three of these items are simply for the purpose of extending the anticipated completion dates of those. These were already presented to the council back in March, and so there's no scope changes or content related to that. It's all about the dates to end the audits.
Okay, great. Does any of my colleagues here have any questions or comments? And I just want to recognize that committee member Vinker has just joined us. Oh, no lights. Just go ahead. Go for it.
Yeah, would like to understand how we got into this situation, because a couple of them say you're sort of just missing a signature. So if we can help make corrective action on that indirectly, that'd be nice too.
Yes, the process for the task orders being signed after the March council meeting, there was a delay in that process. What typically happens is that the task orders are presented to the chair, and then they are entered into the DocuSign software and then sent to myself, and I sign them, and then we would proceed. So while the council, or the committee, and then the council would have approved the task orders, we typically do not begin the work until we have those signed documents in hand. And so we waited for those throughout that process. There are a couple of other circumstances. Number one, in particular, regarding ALPR, we had some delays with getting document requests and meetings established with the vendor involved in this process. So that audit is actually underway. It has already begun. So we've made some progress, but we absolutely had delays on responsiveness from the vendor. In terms of disaster recovery, we, as mentioned in a previous meeting, we had a little bit of delay with the cybersecurity report, and we did not want the cybersecurity report to still be open and then start a disaster recovery and have those overlap. So we also paused before we are to begin this DR audit. I have a meeting with Darren later this week to talk about the actual launch date for that audit.
Actually, one thing, oh, sorry. Just one thing is, if my colleagues, because the auditor is remote, if you guys could turn your camera on to your iPad, that'd be awesome for her, so she can see you.
And so the third task order is the risk assessment and internal audit plan for FY24. In the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be making a presentation to the ELT membership to discuss the content of the risk assessment and the way that that is going to be carried out. And as well, we will be following up with all of the council members to interview you also in order to compile the risk assessment results and then present to you a proposed annual audit plan thereafter.
So was the signature the chair of this committee that you were missing?
Yes, we originally obtained the signature of the vice mayor, who was the former chair. And so that needed to be changed as well.
Okay. Well, we shouldn't be delaying your work, so scream and shout if that happens.
Okay. Will do.
Yeah, so first of all, apologies for being a couple minutes late. I will say that I was able to witness firsthand Palo Alto's finest our police and fire responding to an emergency, what looked like a fairly significant accident just 2 blocks from my house on my way here. So it did delay my arrival, but it was quite impressive, the response that I witnessed. I had the same reaction Councilmember Lowing had. It's hard to believe that because of a signature that it was, we're doing this now. So anything we can do to get a signature that could avoid preparing a packet, talking about it now, voting on it, doing all these things that seem a lot more work than getting a signature, and maybe I'm wrong, but would be much appreciated in the future. And if we can be of any help, I'm sure we'd be happy to. But I mean, that said, I have no objection to the extensions. We want the work done. We're glad to have the work done. We're glad that you're on it and bringing it to us and asking to continue to do the work. But yeah, I would hope that we don't ever see this type of a request for an extension again. And similarly, with the people you couldn't get a hold of, were those Palo Alto employees or vendors to the city?
Vendors to the city.
Well, that's troubling. And so I think with respect to those vendors, they should be made aware that as part of their duties to our city, we would hope they would be responsive to our auditors. Because it just seems silly that PNS has to take time on these kinds of extensions and that it gets in the way of your good works. But, you know, that said, I have no objection to the extension. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions or comments, do either one of you guys make a motion here?
Go for it.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we approve item 1, which is 1A, 1B, 1C. Is anyone willing to second it?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Anyone want to speak to the motion? Comments? Okay, can the clerk take the vote, please?
Councilmember Binker,
Yes.
Chair Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowing,
Yes.
the motion carries 3-0.
Oh, sorry. Do we have to have anyone who wants to speak on item 1? Are there any people who requested?
We have no request to speak.
Okay, so we're going to close public comment for 1 as well. Okay, we're moving on to item 2, which is the city council referral to discuss and recommend council procedures and protocols on the board and commission related sections and other city council referrals related to the city council procedures and protocols. Does staff have anything that you'd like to say?
I'll just introduce the item, and if the chair people in the room can come forward, then can you move a chair over, please? Thank you. This side. Yes, and I'll move down a seat. Give me a second. Okay, sorry about that, and thank you for letting us play musical chairs. This item is one of the referrals that came from the city council in your discussion of the procedures and protocols handbook. The interest that actually originated at this committee was in crafting language about the role have a council liaison, that you wanted to do that work in partnership with the lovely people at the table with me that are chairs of those boards and commissions. There was also one other one about not lobbying boards and commissions. And so we just smushed both of those referrals together today and in hopes that you can have that dialogue with the board and commission chair. So the format is completely up to you. And we as staff will just take notes. If you stretch it as far in your dialogue today to actually come up with specific language that you want to put into the handbook, we obviously are open to that. If you just kind of get the things that you want to include in the language and then give us some follow-ups, myself and the city attorney's office can work on drafting that language. So the last thing I'll note, and then I will be quiet, is not all of your boards and commissions and lovely volunteers for the city have a council liaison. So you will notice, as many volunteers as we have, you only have a few people in front of you today. And Mr. Coloma Smith, I believe, will be online. And so there's about 6 commissions that have a liaison, and that's the audience that you have with you to engage today. Thank you.
Okay, great. So there's 2 particular things that we have referrals on. One is 2.2, which is refrain from lobbying board and commission members. And then the second one is role of council liaison to boards and commissions, or boards or commission. And so since we have the commission and board chairs here, I think we can start with 2.8, discuss this item first. And then afterwards, we could probably talk about 2.2, since that's probably less relevant for the board and commission chairs here. And one thing I'd like to ask if the city clerk could do is maybe as we chat, if you can maybe just bring up a Google Doc and help take notes so that we could kind of frame some of our thinking here. And in terms of format for 2.8, what I was thinking about us doing is for us to maybe first give a chance for our chairs, just a few minutes each, to kind of talk about kind of what would be helpful, right, in terms of a council liaison, at least for your particular board or commission. And then we could also ask you questions or make comments. So I just want to first check with my colleagues to see if this sounds like a good plan, or if you guys have suggestions on how to do it better.
I'm happy starting with 2.8, and I'm happy hearing from our chairs first, which, by the way, thanks so much for joining us tonight, because I'm intensely curious what you think about this. I would also like to ask them what they think about 2.2 when we get to that. I would very much like to have that conversation, include them.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
I'd like to just give them the opportunity to introduce themselves for those online or here.
Yeah, actually, that's a good suggestion. So maybe as you talk about, how you see the council liaison, if you could also address community member Lowling as well on that particular topic.
And the origination of this a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, was just the thought that council shouldn't just proceed as normal with whoever, which commissions have assignments of liaisons and which don't. And they shouldn't just proceed with whatever we're doing in each of those commissions. We should figure out if that's the best way to do it. And so I was one of the folks that now say we should hear from the experts, those who have that. And because it's really sort of almost a bottoms up exercise, saying, what is it that you need? And if it's, we don't really need a liaison, that's okay. If it's that we need a liaison, but they want to change in such and such a way, that's okay too. So it's just wide open for us to, sort of quote, take your testimony. So.
Okay, great. So, we're a small group here, and the point of this kind of small group is for us to have a very open, fluid conversation. So who would like to begin?
I win. Jeff Greenfield, Chair of the Parks and Rec Commission. I'm in my 7th year on the commission, and I've been chair 3 times and vice chair 3 times. So I've seen a lot of varying styles of a liaison, and I think one of the most important roles a liaison plays is, and then it's not so obvious perhaps, but it's just the presence of being part of the commission, witnessing the commission, being there to support the commission. And often the council member, the liaison, may not do very much during the meeting, but the fact that their presence is there is really appreciated. In conversely, when the liaison isn't there, and that's a regular thing, that's noticed by the commission or the board or commission as well. And it, for better or worse, it can lead to questions of the body, wondering about the worth of the work that they're doing and the time that they're putting in. I certainly appreciate that the role that the city council members play, and the amount of time they put in is immense. And I respect that there's conflicts that come up, and attending the BCC meeting as a liaison isn't always a top priority, and it's superseded often by other council activity. The first key, I think, would be to communicate, make sure that there is a written policy to communicate to the chair or the staff liaison if the city council liaison will not be attending a meeting. So that removes some ambiguity and clarifies things. Most of the time, I've been fortunate. The Parks and Rec Commission has been fortunate that we've had a very active liaison, and I guess it's particularly when that follows a year when the liaison is pretty much absent. It's appreciated all the more. So the first thing is just the presence. Then the kind of the general role of accessibility and availability to advise and consult is important. It's a little gray. It's not normally as a chair. I'll try to reach out to the liaison at the end of an item to ask if they have any comments they'd like to make. Sometimes for some items, it's not appropriate for them to comment, and recognize that, particularly if it's an action that's going to be going to city council for review. But even in the process of drafting an action and a recommendation, there may be some way that the liaison can advise and make a recommendation that would be helpful. But I think clarifying in the BCC handbook what's appropriate for what kind of comments are appropriate for a liaison and what kind of comments would not be appropriate would be helpful for the liaison, for the commission, for the chair. I mean, it's important that for the chair to have this understanding, even if the commission members aren't so clear on it, but to have that documented so people can read through that, I think would be helpful. This question of in-person versus online via Zoom. We've all of the bodies have come up with their own policy on guidelines for in-person or remote participation. I think that would just be useful to include in the handbook as well, guidelines on that. I certainly understand that for a council member to be able to participate online and be able to multitask a bit during the meeting could be helpful given the time commitment and the workload, but that's a consideration, but just clarification on that would be helpful. Participation in the annual retreat is useful, where the commission is setting the goals for the year and establishing for the Parks and Rec Commission to make great use of ad hoc committees and liaison roles, as some of you are aware of, and establishing, and which leads directly to establishing the work plan. And the work plan has been one of the more confusing, cumbersome, difficult activities that the BCCs have taken on in the past couple of years. It's getting cleared up. The city clerk certainly plays a role in kind of setting a guiding light for us there, but the council liaison may participate in that as well. I think I'll pause here, and I have a little more to say, but
Okay, maybe before we go to the next person, maybe I'd just like to give my colleagues a chance to ask questions, reflect, comment on anything that might have been said so far. Or if you have nothing to say, don't worry about it too.
Yeah, I'd rather just wait to hear all four and then.
Okay, I'll make a quick comment. So actually, it's good hearing your feedback about this. I think it's actually quite good to hear. So I also was chair of the Planning and Transportation Commission I was on there for 2 terms. So yeah, I think that I think knowing what extent you want your liaison to participate, actually, I think is very, very helpful. For myself, as a liaison, I always kind of, and this kind of goes to like 2.2, I think the boards commission play a critical role for the council because you guys are making recommendations to us. And so I always kind of saw it as I want the board or commission to be very independent, to basically try to dissect the issue, debate it, look at it from many different ways, and try to independently come up with a recommendation that they think will be best for the city. And so I kind of value that independence. And so I myself, as I was listening to you, but because you actually are very interested in a very active liaison, and as a liaison from my perspective, it's always like, God, I don't want to tip the scale. I want these guys to kind of think independently and be able to derive opinions that may or may not be counter to mine. And so I find your comments actually quite interesting. So thank you for that. Okay, who'd like to go next?
Chair, may I interject something?
Sure.
All right. So yeah, I actually found that really helpful as well. I'm just looking at our handbook rule here, where it talks about the role of the liaison being to share prior council discussions and actions, and assist the board or commission in understanding likely council perspectives on issues. So if you could perhaps incorporate into your comments whether those two things make sense to you, sound good, sound bad, or you would revise them, that'd be really helpful too. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Senya Chen, Chair of the Public Art Commission. I've been on the commission for slightly over 5 years. This is my first year serving as the chair, and it's been a pleasure and a privilege. I would say that I echo very much what Jeff said. Having the presence of a liaison council member is fantastic. In particular, I think there's something unique about the Public Art Commission in that some of our actions are not actually advisory only. So for instance, I don't think a lot of Public Art Commission issues come in front of the council. And some of our decisions are actually quite visible. And so you'll have, people debating about a mural that do you want to restore? Do you want to, deaccession? And it becomes very topical. And of course, the city council then hears directly from our public. And so having the liaison, the city council's perspective or input on a particular topic, I think it's really helpful in anchoring and shepherding some of the decision-making process. And I also echo what Jeff said in terms of potentially participating in maybe the retreat, because that's when we work on the plan for the year, and having the council's perspective on the plan overall is really helpful. Because previously, I believe in the prior years, we have an opportunity annually to come in front and sit with the council and present and have a little bit of a dialogue. So that has taken away some of that opportunity to dialogue more freely. So having the liaison's person's presence, I think, in the meetings will be helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any comments, questions, reflections? Okay, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, I'm Alyssa Eagleson-Cheslevich. I'm the chair of the Historic Resources Board. So I'm a relatively new chair. I did my first meeting about 2 weeks ago. So some of this is going to speak to my experience as a board member as well. But I'll echo what other speakers have said this evening, that it is really nice to have a member of the city council present there to listen to the dialogue and kind of, have that involvement. One of the questions I have particularly as a newer chair and, kind of speaking to what you mentioned earlier is, how to get that feedback from the liaison about, what the council history is with a particular issue, or what, if there are thoughts that are appropriate to share, and what the scope of that might look like, and what that dialogue might look like, having more information about that, or, kind of an introduction to that, I think would be helpful. My experience as a board member so far is that the Historic Resources Board has had, relatively minimal needs in terms of feedback, but I can also see and I can envision situations where, we might want a little bit like more communication and a little more opportunity for that kind of dialogue that was mentioned. So, to sort of understand how that might work better, particularly in the context of a board where the needs have been historically somewhat lesser, more minimal. Yeah.
Okay, great. Questions, comments? Okay, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, good evening. Lauren Siegel. I am the chair of the Utility Advisory Commission, and it's my second time as chair. I also served as vice chair twice, and I'm I think I'm on 6 years. And it's been awesome. I will say, just as an intro, over those 6 or so years, I think the role of the UAC has changed quite a bit as the focus of the city has shifted over those 6 years. Electrification, fiber being two of the biggest changes since I've been on the commission. And with that comes more attention and more community, I think, attention. And then just the economics of utilities across the state and across the country as our bills go up, that also generates more attention. And so with that, I guess also, Councilmember Vinker, you said feedback on prior council discussions, and what was the second one?
Prior council discussions and actions on issues as applicable, and assist the board or commission in understanding likely council perspectives on issues,
Okay.
as well as how the board or commission might support council decision-making.
Okay, thanks. So a couple of things, and I also want to say that in the past, and Councilmember Lowing is our current liaison, and we've had great, for the most part, they've been great and they've been active, and it's, I'd say, one of the, from my perspective, it's not so much having a council member to raise import, but really the value is to exactly what you just said, to understand what our likely council positions or priorities, and also what has been discussed in council, because I think of it as sort of a feedback loop. And if the liaison isn't helping provide that feedback, then we really don't know. We've been, I'd say, lucky. We've had members who have been around a long time. And right now, one of our UAC members, I guess he's vice chair now, was on city council. So he brings this historic perspective, and I've really appreciated how much that helps, because every year there are there's new members on the city council, there are new members on the commissions, and sometimes that historical perspective really helps, like, why did we do X, Y, and Z or not? Sorry. And then a couple other specifics. A perfect example was our last meeting where one of our commissioners asked a question where he wanted to know a specific detail about the SCAP, and that was generated by a council member. I don't know who's speaking to him. I don't think that's a good mechanism. It's not really fair to staff, because they're not getting the opportunity to prepare for the question, and it's not really, I think, appropriate way to generate questions and communicate with the commission. I much prefer a more formal process where it's through the liaison, or it's open in a public meeting and not one. And maybe this is to your second, to 2.2, but okay, so maybe I'll wait for 2.2, or maybe we can say it. I'll just stop on that now. And then the other piece I don't think we've talked about yet is that our role is to support council. And sometimes it's unclear the best way to do that. And so the more feedback we get from you as to what you need from us, I think we're more efficient with our time as well. And then just specific to the UAC, I hope I'm not speaking too long, but specific to the UAC, and in particular with everything that's going on with SCAP, and this also came up last Wednesday, was we don't have a great sense of within SCAP, what the priorities are, the goals, the timeline, and the budget, or how budget is, how council hopes to allocate the budget. And so I think we spent a fair amount of time talking about SCAP and trying to answer details on our last meeting that may not have been so helpful for council, because we're sort of guessing. Yeah, do you have a question? So that's specific to SCAP. I don't think there's been enough of a communication, and it's a big priority, I know. Okay.
Okay, well, great. Thank you. Thank you all. First of all, thank you all for your service and thank you for your feedback as well. I want to bring it back to my colleagues here to see if you guys have any comments, questions, pontifications.
That was
Sorry.
tremendous.
Chair Tanaka, sorry. Kaloma Smith has joined online. So if you wanted that feedback before you dove all the way in.
Yeah, I just want to give everyone a chance. You just got started. You want to say something first?
I'm happy to listen to Chair Smith because it was going to be collective comments.
Okay. Chair Smith, are you there? Do you want to I don't know. I'm not sure how much have you heard, but
I just got on. I just finished Bible study.
No problem. Okay, so basically, the other chairs have just finished giving some of their thoughts. What they're trying to do is talk about how they've seen the role of the liaison, how the role of the liaison has helped, and we wanted to get your perspective on this. So if you could share just a few words on this, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think our commission, particularly dealing with the human side of our city and issues that tend to deal with the marginalized, gain extreme benefit from the position of the liaison for a few reasons. I think, first of all, I think it's good to hear, not every commissioner can watch every city council meeting or every city council debate. So even having a liaison to explain where the city is, what the debate is, where those parts are really helpful. So, when you start talking about things like police reform, and you start talking about things like his rap that have budgetary implications, or you start talking about things like the current project that we're doing on AANHPI, having that feedback loop is critical for us because it's helpful. Even as we're dealing with the rental reform, I know last week you guys voted on rent control and brought some stuff down to 6 months, and then we are going to provide another report to you that deals with a more expansive piece. But not having that liaison, we don't have that level of communication, and I think it's absolutely tangible. I think it also helps sometimes center our conversations, because when you have somebody that's in council and has heard like the debate and the discussion, they can say, hey, this is what was said in council. So, and this is how I interpreted it. So it's really helped us focus in sometimes on the primary issues, because sometimes the written document doesn't always get intention, context, and texture, and having that liaison. Also, it is helpful when we get to a point where we might be at a log jam, or we might want to send something back to council and get some feedback. They can bring it up or get it on the agenda or talk to their folks as much as the Brown Act or staff allows. So I absolutely think that the liaison is critical. I really believe in a city with this distributed leadership and democracy with commissions, having commissions that make significant decisions, HRC, planning, ARB, and having somebody from council interacting with them is critical, because you get to see where policies, you get to hear public debate, you get to interact with them. And I think it's absolutely critical that we have the liaison from the council. And I think all commissions should, because we don't lift commissions up just to waste people's time. We lift commissions up because they have very specific needs in our city. And I don't believe the HRC is any greater than any other commission, but I believe that all the different elements of the city, the council needs to have their hand on. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Do you want to say a few words?
Sure. First of all, thank you again, all of you, for coming and sharing. I have to say that was tremendously heartening to hear from you that it's actually a valuable liaison. It's valuable to have a council liaison. For all I knew, you were going to say, oh, it's sort of annoying, irritating. They're always talking about their body. So that's really heartening to hear. And obviously, we want to do it well still. It also makes me wonder whether certain other commissions or committees that don't have a liaison, we may want to revisit on a separate item sometime. I was struck by Chair Chen's comment about the Arts Commission, that a lot of your decisions are independent in the sense that they don't reach council, but it's still valuable because of the relationship we have with our residents. And that was very interesting to me, and I'm glad to hear that. I think what I'm interested in hearing is, you mentioned, Chair Siegel, that with the SCAP, you're struggling a little bit. And, Councilmember Lowing, I'm sure, is an excellent liaison, but he's not on SCAP, so he doesn't know what we're talking about every time. And that makes me wonder if we should talk about what attributes of council members, how we choose and select. Right now, it's just the mayor appoints us. So for whatever reasons and his or her judgment, it's a fit or balancing other duties. But I wonder if for certain commissions, if there's some of our subcommittees that relate to your commission work, if that may be too hard to align, but if you could say it and make it so, I'm curious what you would think about those kinds of attributes of council members that are assigned to your individual commissions.
Feel free to comment if you guys want.
If I can just comment on SCAP, because that's super interesting. In the past, it was the other way around. I don't know who wants to put in, it's a question of who's got more time, I guess. I don't know, but.
And I will say that last week at SCAP, we were talking about our plan for the remainder of the year. And one of the things we were talking about is, when we would meet, when our sort of advisory commission would meet, whether UIC should come to certain of those meetings. So we were thinking that way as well. But hadn't occurred to me that council liaison might be another mechanism for at least communication.
I would say, actually, I really appreciate your comment. We do derive a lot of benefit from our liaison presence and attention to our commission's effort. I'll give you a couple for instance. Mayor Koo previously, when she was vice mayor, served with was the liaison for the Public Art Commission, and I think she attended every single meeting. And she was generally quite deferential to our activities, and would not weigh in, to sort of grab the mic from other people. So we're quite deferential to our independence. But there was one fairly controversial topic that was up for discussion. And she was immediately able to jump in and kind of back channel and, give input to the extent it needed to be escalated and help the staff plan out what the necessary steps were in case it needed to be escalated to council. And so I think that level of just understanding how the inner workings of the city government was greatly appreciated. And I would say, for instance, this year, one of the things that came to our attention was some of the commission sizes were being revisited. And I personally didn't have visibility to how that was, that had happened with other commissions. And so I personally feel like we've been kind of playing catch up for the Public Art Commission, and it would be really helpful to have our commission size be revisited as well, along with other commissions. So, I think those are two ways. One demonstrated how it kind of worked, and the other is an opportunity. Thank you.
I'd like to comment, just follow up on something that from both Chair Tanaka and Chair Siegel. Just in terms of it's a balance, it's a fine line between working independently and steering, and steering and guiding. I think that's really a focus role of the liaison, and it kind of gets back to the questions Councilmember Venker is asking. feedback does drive efficiency, and absolutely, we are here to serve and advise. We're an advisory body to you, as that's our primary role, and we want to make sure that we're on track. And so any channeling you can help do to guide us along the way is really appreciated. Certainly, my experience is that frequently for the liaisons attending the meeting, it's a learning opportunity for them to learn more depth about what the commissions do and gain more knowledge about one particular area of the city. So I hope that's helpful for the council members. But then just touching back on the independent decisions that our commission may make sometimes, the Parks and Rec Commission similarly will advise on two levels of matters. An action would be a specific recommendation to City Council on a policy change that would be taken up by City Council, but a lot of the parks rules and regulations and some of the policies as well are staff decisions. And so in that case, it's a discussion item by the commission, and that feedback goes directly, it's not a vote, but it's a discussion, and the information goes to staff to help them with their decision. But that's something that's not going to go to City Council. So that's kind of a similarity that probably is shared with a number of commissions. One thing that's not really clear sometimes is the takeaway of a liaison in terms of what they might take back to City Council from a meeting. And so if there a way to communicate that perhaps to the commissions and boards, that might be helpful. It's kind of a great thing. It's kind of a nice to have in a wish list.
Yeah, I think there's Brown Act issues around that if it's not agendized, it's hard to do, but I think that's an excellent point.
Well,
I'll just,
but the liaison can talk to the chair anytime.
Yeah.
So that's a natural communication channel.
right. I thought it was when we bring it back, how do we distribute it amongst council, but maybe I misunderstood.
More of an understanding what the takeaway would be from the liaison that would be channeled back to City Council in some manner.
Right. Well, I'll stop talking.
Can
I
I
just
say
wanted to.
one thing?
Go.
I think Councilmember Tanaka was our liaison, but I think and he did a great job doing it. And I think one of the things was he gave him more information for the dialogue that was happening in council. So if an issue came up, he said, I was sitting in the HRC meeting and this was the discussion points, or they had this and this person speaking. So I think it might be an informal kind of feedback, but it gives various council members more information to enliven or enrichen the discussion that's happening in the council meeting.
Yeah, that's my instinct. I will stop talking. I just wanted to say that, I really appreciate the tremendous expertise and time that you all can put into drilling down on these issues, because it's just incredible. The people we have in this city that serve on these commissions are amazing, and what you each bring to them is phenomenal, and I think enriches the city in ways that we don't have bandwidth or perhaps the expertise to do. So I really appreciate us exploring this liaison relationship tonight.
Yeah, I was going to mention a couple of things, but I'll go first to the one of the things that I wanted to get to, and we're on it, so I'm going to stay on it, which is, are commissions independent, or do they take orders from council? And my answer to that, as a kind of headlines, is that A, it's both, and B, it depends on the commission. So my experiences sitting for years on the Parks Commission were totally different than my years sitting on the Planning Commission. One of the reasons of which is on the Planning Commission, there was no liaison. But we sort of didn't need it because so many of the things that we did, council by law had to pay attention to us. So it was a little bit easier to get their attention. So that was not a constraint. And there was a lot of discussion proactively from council members to ask opinions after the meetings. Tell me what about this nuance or whatever. But I strongly believe that primarily that the commissions and boards are independent, and that they're sort of bottoms up information, kind of taking input from hearings, official hearings, and informally from our citizens, and kind of filtering that into decisions that become recommendations to council for policy. I'll state the reverse even more strongly. There were times on planning, not on parks, where we would get messages back from council members that, we've already decided that. Why are you coming up with something different? And in one case, I said to a council member, because you decided it 2 years ago. And a lot has changed in 2 years, and we're going to listen to the people, and we're going to do our best judgment and come up with what we think our recommendation is. And we don't ever have a vote, so you still get the vote. So I would always side with commissions in my discussion with council members of let them do their work, do their good work. On difficult situations, and then we listen to that and make decisions. So I think it's primarily independent. There are some things that, by definition, again, in some commissions that have to come and are already decided. So planning would get recommendations of, here's what we like about this bill. Here are the 5 things we want you to take a second look at because we don't like them. So we've already gotten direction then that we can't come back with the same 5 and say we want the opposite way, because we want the exact thing we did the first time because they've already made that decision. So that's okay. But I think the independence of these boards is just crucial because of the work and the value add. I want to go back to using this good example of SCAP. I think that any commission can have guest speakers. So if at some point we should have on UAC said, let's get somebody that's a committee or the chair of the SCAP to come and give a presentation to the UAC. So that informs you and those 7 members to do more good work in the next year. That's just, that'll happen. The chair can ask for that and it'll happen. So, it could be a committee member, whatever. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the liaison. And I'm not disagreeing with you that that's not a good idea. But the commission should have access to any information that they need to do their work or to do better work. In terms of, this is getting a little bit into the 2.8 then, I think my view on that is that having been on a commission which was Parks, where I think I had 4 different liaisons when I was on that, and planning where we didn't have one, and now I am a liaison. So from those 3 perspectives, I think being mostly quiet is the right thing to do. And I think sometimes asking pointed questions with or without that being from the council as a whole, as opposed to the liaison just trying to understand that so that they know the answer when they're asked by council up here. So those kinds of pointed questions, I don't think that they should ever be involved in a debate on items. I don't think that's the council member's role at all. And of course, it goes without saying they wouldn't have any votes. So that's where I think we would draw the line and kind of change this language a little bit and say, they wouldn't participate in debate, but there would be a channel of communication and a resource, as well as taking information back from the commission. I was also going to joke the opposite direction, which is that there are commissions without liaisons and they're not asking for one. So I don't know if that means that who needs one or what. So that's just another dimension. But when they were doing the commission handbook and I wasn't on council yet, I was really concerned that all commissions were being treated equally. And there's just a lot of distinction between them, from the need for numbers of people. It turns out that this council decided at the request of HRC that the prior council had gone too far by reducing that number. And so then we've added them back now. So we can also make those kinds of changes, but the councils have a lot of differences. And so liaisons or not, and how each liaison works can also be different depending on the needs of the way that information goes back and forth and what you're responsible for. So I just needs to be some flexibility there.
May I follow up on one thing that Councilmember Lowing just said, because it's a little unclear to me, actually. I think you said that whatever commission chair, whatever information they want, they should be able to ask for it and get it. And I would just, I don't know, we've had a couple challenges in that. I believe in the city council handbook, you have a maximum number of hours of staff time you can use that are outside of what's on your items. And we've had a challenge where on our agenda, and it may not even be on our work plan, although our work plan's pretty broad. You could probably argue anything touching utilities is on there, where they're using staff time, and it's become a problem because our utility staff is so under-resourced, and when a commissioner asks for something, they sort of stop what they're doing and jump to try to provide the answer, and it's become a bit of a toll on staff. And I think what we've tried to do as a workaround, at least for now, is to say questions have to come either through the chair or through the director, so that we're aware of what's coming in and also can try to help protect staff from spending too much time if it's not.
I think you do need to filter and stay on the work plan. The reason the work plan in that whole scenario of the revision came into place is council at the time was concerned that you and they should be on the same page in terms of what's going to happen in a given year. Maybe a little bit later, we can get some feedback from you on, is that working or not? But I was referring more to not a commissioner coming up with a new agenda item that wasn't on the work plan for the year, as opposed to, we could use some more ground level input on SCAP, since that's what we're talking about right now.
I just want to stop right here to see if the clerk has anyone from the public that wants to speak. And if so, we should have public comment. Otherwise, we'll kind of close public comment on this item.
Chair, we have no request to speak.
Okay, so we'll close public comment. Why don't you guys keep on discussing? Anyone? Any have any comments?
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering if, and Chair, you may have comments before you want to do this, but I'm wondering if it might be helpful for the clerk to put up the language of 2.8. It feels to me like it's compatible with what we've been discussing, but to see if they have any specific comments in the language, because we have it in our report, but I'm not sure that they have it in front of them.
Yeah, actually, I was hoping the clerk, if you could bring up the 2.8, the language, and also I wanted to also for us to take notes for what people are saying, so that that's also captured. But it's okay. Let's just bring up the 2.8.
It's on page 26, the last page of the packet.
Did you have any other thoughts?
My thought was that what I've heard seems pretty consistent with the language as is, and I'm not sure that for 2.8 anyway, and I don't know that it would need to be amended, but I wanted to test that to see if there were different views from our chairs here. I think 2.2 will take a little more discussion, but I thought perhaps we could get settled on 2.8.
Well, I would think that thought about, the role of the liaison is to be a channel of communication, not a participant in debate.
Yeah,
Something
I'd
like
like
that.
to explore that a little more, because I think there's some nuances. Oh, I see. For in 2.8, you want to put that. I was thinking you meant
Yeah.
2.2.
No, 2.8.
Yeah, if the clerk could just copy maybe 2.8 and 2.2 and put that into a Google Doc or something, so that you could share it on the screen so that everyone could see it, that'd be great.
We could amend that.
Okay, any other thoughts?
Just that I think that Councilmember Lowing's suggestion is a good one to amend 2.8, as I understand it, to add and not participate in debate.
Okay.
in the commission or board or commissions debate.
Okay.
But let's see what our chairs think.
Do any of the chairs want to respond to that?
Chair Tanaka, I think this is great, but are we going to show them the language of 2.8?
The clerk's trying.
Okay, great. Because it was there a moment ago. There it is.
And we can't actually see the language from here. We're getting another monitor set up.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cause a technical challenge. Okay.
How do we feel, and just speaking to the committee members here, about this thing, likely council perspectives, understanding likely council perspectives? I wouldn't want that to be perceived as, here's what I think four of the seven are going to vote for, so don't give us any opinions.
I agree with you completely. Okay, I'll give you guys my perspective on this, which is, last night we were here, to past 12, right?
12,
And
15.
that's not, unfortunately, that unusual. And we have boards of commissions of incredibly talented people who a lot of times know more than we do about a particular topic. And I think we need to leverage that more. I think that in some cities, actually, more decision-making is actually delegated to the boards of commission. And I actually would be in favor of that. I would like to see more of that, to be honest. Maybe like, for instance, we have the thing of, if it's a unanimous decision, maybe it just goes to consent, but maybe even more so than that. Because I think in order for us to operate well as a council, we need to delegate to people who have the time and expertise to do this. And on council, our agendas are always filled, right? We meet more than just about any other council that I know of in the area, and longer. Okay, not just more frequent, but longer. And so part of that is knowing how to delegate. And so I actually think it's important that we learn to delegate some of these decisions to our boards of commissions, and maybe less revisiting some of the same. Because like when I first, like you, went from planning commission to council, the first 6 months were the same things I saw on planning commission. It's kind of like deja vu, and you may have that same feeling. And the crazy thing is, at least at the time, I kind of felt that the discussions we had on planning commission were actually better. So I think we should try to empower our boards commission more. But I think that also needs to be independent. So I'm agreeing with you on that.
So we could just simply, Councilmember Baker is the wordsmither of council, so with all of her attorneys, but I was just going to say that in this case, where we want the communication here, I think it should say understanding prior council perspectives, because that talks about the history and where the council's been, but it doesn't put any constraints on changing from the perspectives that are there.
Isn't that what it says in the first line? It doesn't have perspectives, but we could add perspectives there.
Yeah. I didn't bother to go up there and read that line, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I think that I agree with the chair's comments about respecting the expertise of the commissions and the time and effort also put in from the commissions. And I tend to try to do that, especially when they come to us as a unanimous vote. For example, on the e-bikes, there was a lot of work that went in by the Parks Commission before it came to us, and that was a factor in my vote. So I think that that's an important factor, but obviously it's not absolute, because there was a split even on our committee tonight on that particular issue. So I think we have to have some degree of flexibility. That is our job, is to make the tough calls, even if they're not to make the tough calls. But I think that affording that deference is appropriate. I don't think we need to legislate it or write it in here, but I think the thing for me I keep coming back to is So this 2.8 is broken into two. Context to the commission as they consider things. Just let you know, when we went through our priority setting, we said, we don't want to do that till next year. And so they're not likely to be too excited about wanting to do it this year. That kind of thing, I think, is not so much persuading as describing. And I think that's what you have in mind, Councilmember Lowing. When I then read the next half, which is understanding likely council perspectives on issues. Yeah, I don't think that they should be guessing how we're all going to vote, but I sort of read that as taking that history and saying, this council has rejected, the last 4 things of that kind, and may not be receptive to this, and just want you to know that. But that may not be different than sharing history. So maybe we don't need the second half. Maybe we can collapse this into one thought, but I don't know if there's something different that our chairs would encourage us to do.
If I can, that middle part about assisting the board in understanding likely council perspectives, I don't really have a strong feeling. I kind of hear both sides, but how the board or commission might support council decision-making, I do think that piece is important to keep in there. And I can say in the past, what maybe that middle clause phrase, where it's come up is like, hey, while you're discussing this, council, I guess that would all be in the perspective of what's happened. So maybe you don't need that middle part as much, and maybe then it's less sensitive in terms of directing how votes would happen or something.
So glad to see you struggling with it. I had the exact same thing. It feels like it's kind of 2 different ideas, but every time I articulate that middle piece, it comes back to sort of giving context from historical considerations and communications. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking though, once in a while, maybe since we meet on Wednesdays, maybe you've gotten a packet for the following Monday, and I can think of a handful of times where the liaison would say, well, actually, we're talking about such and such, so having this feedback would be helpful, but I don't really think that's so critical.
Well, when you were talking about budgets on UAC, as you were coming up for that, I gave you a perspective on where there, I can't remember what that was right now, but it had to do with the rates, I think. Yeah, it had to do with the rates, but I can't remember exactly what the point was, but I was giving you perspective, not saying you need to vote this way. Just, this is something that's really important to the council.
Right, and I think those reminders are helpful at least for the UAC, I don't know. So I was thinking of another budget one, so maybe it was all around budget.
I have a question / suggestion in the last sentence where it says support council decision-making. If that's read the wrong way, it kind of sounds like there's a lack of independence. I'm wondering if inform might be a better word to use there.
What word?
Inform.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So if you want me to do my wordsmithing thing.
Yeah, actually, can the clerk copy 2.2 and 2.8 into a Google Docs that you could edit and then bring to screen so that we can try to revise this?
Isn't this a Word doc that's up right now?
I don't think so, but I could be wrong. Is it?
Is this PDF or Word?
It is a Word doc, but it'd be better if you cut and paste it because this is my master document. So where I have to have everything correct for the one we need to upload next week. So
We're
thanks
saving
in
you time. We're
advance.
just doing it directly.
Except it hasn't been approved, so it gets a little complicated. Thank you.
So Chair, just to clarify, you said you wanted 2.2 and 2.8 on a separate document?
Actually, why don't you put on both on the same, just make it easier for yourself.
I'm sorry, one more time?
Just copy 2.8 and 2.2 and put it on the same Word doc.
Okay.
Okay, maybe can you turn on track changes? And there are a few suggestions that have been made so far, and maybe we could try to encapsulate some of that and then think about this a little bit more and see if there's anything else that we should do. So committee member Finker, if you want to maybe help him just.
Actually, I think there may be a fairly simple way to do it. If we simply leave the role of council liaison to a board or commission is to share prior council discussions and actions on issues as applicable, comma. I think we're all good up to there.
Yep.
If we took out that comma and struck and just said to assist the board or commission and well, it's not the only reason we do it, I guess, but then we're not telling them what the likely council perspective is, but they would understand from if we're only speaking about the past, one of the reasons we do that would be to assist the board or commission in understanding likely council perspectives on issues. So we could very simply just strike comma and put to. How about to inform?
I wonder if you could leave the first to as applicable and then say, and to provide perspective on how the board or commission might, what was it? Inform council decision-making.
I think that is a separate independent action when you're talking about informing a
Yeah,
future decision. That doesn't necessarily need to be backward looking.
I agree. I mean,
Right, so
we could just say, where I was going to go initially was to say is to share prior council discussions, comma, perspectives, insert perspectives there and actions on issues as applicable, and then strike and assist the board or commission in understanding likely council perspectives on issues. And then to pick up again and say as well, oh, I see. And assist the board or commission in understanding, and then strike likely council perspectives on issues as well as, and then just pick up with how. So it'd be assist the board or commission in understanding how it might support council decision-making. Sorry, Finn, back and forth. I can't see this. Our council discussions. Yeah. Excellent. On line 1, could you insert after council discussions, comma, perspectives? So toward the end of the first line, where it says council discussions, there, right there, comma, perspectives. I like the second cut.
We still have support in the last line there.
And then, yeah, and change support to inform in the last line. Thank you.
If I may make a suggestion or just a comment, the way this is being revised, it seemed like the board or commission only has an opportunity to receive council discussion perspective that's sort of in a historical context. So we don't have the benefit of the board the council's perspective on any current topic, only historical information. And so that may be the gap that you're deleting.
I think so you're just worried about making current, I guess the point is when they show up, if it was an hour before, the day before, the week before, 2 years before, 5 years, it's prior. And what we're trying to do is have as opposed to a predictor of future council activities. So, but do others of you feel that this eliminates the ability to say?
My concern is this. Oftentimes, things that come in front of the commission or board are not issues of first impression. it may have been something that was brought up previously and then it gets brought up again. So in the context, you can say, well, this has happened before, and you may anticipate that this something else, I've seen this happen before, and I imagine that this, in the future, something else may happen. We may get a letter in this where, these other discussion may get brought up. So that's why I'm kind of thinking the future state of possibly what may happen based on, prior discussion could be helpful.
Agreed. I think I was thinking that if we were informed by staff, by the public about that, that's something we could share, because that would be our prior discussions. So we would know it through discussions. That's why I keep coming back to that. The other way to do it is where I was going at first, which would be to say, to assist the board or commission in understanding the likely council perspective. So we're only sharing prior stuff, but the purpose is to help you with future, to anticipate. But we wouldn't be putting out our own opinions, because that's, I think, where the line is, right? I think Councilmember Lowing's cautioning and against one of us predicting what our colleagues will do.
I appreciate that. I think you're trying to ensure that the comments are objective rather than subjective, and they're objective based on specific council discussions or actions. And I'm not quite clear what perspectives means in terms of what perspective wouldn't be a discussion or an action.
You're right. It would probably have come up in a discussion, but if there was a unanimous sense of among council that, we were done with a certain issue, or we were hoping another one would come up, or, as opposed to guessing, if that had been articulated and those were certain perspectives on whether we would welcome or not something, that it's just a more precise word. I don't suppose we need it, but that's up to my colleagues.
Well, you have actions there already. So if council had taken a vote, I think you said if they were saying we've already voted on something,
I'm always happy to have less words. I was just pulling it from the stuff we struck to try to save that concept, but I don't need it.
I'm wondering if including, I'm sorry.
Oh, just wanted to note, similar to the other sections where the city attorney's office and I actually go back and try to clean up the language. So I think for today, you don't have to master every single word, though I know that you all can do that well. I think some of the key verbs that I'm hearing being discussed are like, what does inform mean? What does assist mean? What are perspectives? So if you guys provide enough direction for us in your mocking up here, we can continue to refine it. I just wanted to make sure you didn't feel like the exact words on the page today have to be the end all be all unless you wanted them to.
well, I don't think we need that word, but the key here, I think what Jeff is saying is that we don't, if there are council biases or probable votes, we don't want that to be communicated, because that would be made up because it isn't an action yet.
And I'm concerned that could be considered as a perspective. So
I am too.
perspective kind of opens the
Take it
door
out.
to ambiguity.
too.
Take it out and then we're done, and Chantal doesn't need to mess with it unless she wants to.
Well, I had another question, just because you think you're
I'm
done.
done. Yeah, sorry.
No, I mean, because you think you're done with this. I just want to ask the question, do we state the basics here enough of that we're a conduit of information or a contact? Or is that just obvious because we're a liaison? I'm not trying to add words either. I just want to make sure that you all are clear with that.
I think we heard almost every single chair say they liked the council member to actually show up. And we don't say that here. We say to share prior council discussions, which could be when asked, when called.
That's
So
a
we
really
should
good point.
decide whether or not we think they
I
should.
think it should be up to whoever the liaison is and the commission or board, right? Because I think it's a little bit hard to be too self-prescriptive, at least on this, but I don't know, I'm willing to entertain other ideas, but I'm just trying to think about keeping it somewhat flexible so that it could be appropriate. And I do wonder if actually all commissions should have some sort of liaison, whether they're there every time or not. It's actually a good question.
I guess my question would be, if they don't show up, what is their role? It's a sincere question.
Yeah, I think the idea of liaison is is someone that can be the go-to person, right? So, and if the person needs to be, they could be there, right? I think I kind of feel like it should be kind of on a, as needed basis. So if it's better for the person to be, the person can be there. If it's better for a person to not be there for whatever reason, they can also not be there, right? But I think it's better to make it maybe a little bit more flexible. But I kind of feel, because on the planning commission, I always wondered, why didn't we have a liaison, right?
May I actually do a follow-up on that question? Who makes the decision about, what works? Is it the board and the commission? I mean, is the board and the commission making a decision, say, we would like to have the liaison attend, or is the liaison making that unilateral decision?
I think it should be a joint decision, right? I think it should be, yeah. So I just don't feel it's like a hard and fast, but I think every board commission should have a liaison. I mean, I don't know your feeling on
Well,
planning, but
I think there's the prior answer, you're not incorrect, but the prior answer is that's what we're trying to figure out. So we can write this handbook however we want to write it if we come back with a recommendation that needs changes. So we could say all commissions have to have a liaison. We could say if you have a liaison, you're expected to attend regularly. We could leave all that out. We could state in there, the chair and the liaison will meet at the beginning of the year to determine, how often the person comes. I mean, all these things are on the table.
I would suggest that the liaison attend at the request of the commission, which could be every time. They could say, we would like someone here every time. And then, absent, conflicts or unusual circumstance, the liaison shows up. Or it could be, there might be some who, unlike you all, don't necessarily want us there and might say, we'll call you for certain ones where it would be really helpful to have you. But I kind of feel like if we're going to take on the liaisonship, that if they want us there, we should go.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that.
I think it's your call.
So,
Thank you.
so maybe just two things we want to consider adding, something like that. And then a second thing is, and we brought this topic up, I didn't necessarily know where you guys stand on this. Should all boards and commissions have a liaison? And I would say yes, but I'd love to hear your guys' perspective.
Well, I would say no. And that's because I had two experiences and they were both fine. And one was with the liaison and the other one was without. No, planning's a little bit different, as I said before, because we have to be a lot closer to council, not closer like we're talking to them every second, and the planning director is the liaison, so I didn't feel it was necessary, and it was not a net loss.
Just from a referral standpoint, I'm not entirely sure that through the procedures and protocols document is where you would recommend that each commission have a liaison. I'm not 100% positive, but that might be a little bit scope creep. So just offering that, it could be something maybe to just suggest when you go back to council, but I don't think you need to stretch that far today.
I agree.
May I make actually just an additional inquiry? The role of the liaison can the liaison also be a resource to the board and the commission? Meaning the way it's describing right now, I think the input is limited to a particular action or issue, or to inform the council's commission needs to know how the commission size is determined.
Perhaps we could say the role of council liaison to a board or commission is to be a point of contact with council.
Yeah.
And to.
That's what I was asking my last question. Are we
With
stating the
counsel.
obvious here? And I think
Well
you're saying
done,
we
Dan.
aren't. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you.
No, I think you're underscoring that fact that we're not stating the obvious. I mean, on parks, for example, I had lots of private meetings with myself as chair, the vice chair, and our liaison on stuff that was kind of going forward, or even looking at the next year. What do you think about this? And it was all it was all speculation because neither one of us were going to vote, but what do you think about this? And so it is meant to be a resource. I mean, we should use that word to be specific about it. That's fine with me.
Why don't we say to be a point of contact and a resource? Point of contact with council and a resource?
Be a point of contact with council and a resource to the board and commission, right?
Perfect.
Maybe comma as well as, so we can keep going. And then I think we wanted to delete perspectives at the end of that row. Thank you. So then the only other thing that I think we've talked about so far is whether we want to talk about the attendance, where we could say the liaison, perhaps at the end, the liaison shall attend board or commission meetings. So the liaison shall attend board or commission meetings as requested by the body, or whatever we're calling it. This is where Chantal can do her thing.
And then the other thing we haven't talked about, which is the issue of, asking questions but not participating in debate.
Right.
That was, I don't even know if we want to go here, but there's also a nuance when, and this happened a lot at Parks, where the liaison was very active, taking up a lot of airtime on particular issues. Not unhelpful at all, but expressing a lot of opinions and so on, as opposed to just asking questions. And those are just two different things. We can come back to the.
So after share prior council discussions and actions on issues as applicable, comma, in the third row, yeah, we could say, but not participate in debate, comma.
Show
Give
me
a
where that
lot of
is.
commas, but we can at least get the thought down and then we can fix it. So is that
No.
the idea?
No, I don't think so, because that's sharing prior council discussions and actions.
Would you want to expressly say participate in discussions? I thought we were trying not to encourage too much of that.
I'm sorry, didn't hear that?
Do you want to expressly say and participate in discussions? I thought we were trying not to encourage too much of that.
Yes, I agree with that sentiment.
Okay, so that's why it's just sort of starkly says, but not participate in debate is kind of, if there's a better place, we can put it somewhere else. But if
I think it'd be better to start that as a different sentence, something like, liaison can ask informative questions, but would not participate in debate on the issues.
I don't know that, I don't know that you need that, but maybe you had my experience hasn't been to need that level. Not wanting to mandate every single.
That's why you experts are
behavior.
sitting here, to give us that perspective.
'Cause- Yeah,
Maybe you want something like the liaison may participate, may ask questions and provide guidance without participating in debates. Or without participating in debating issues. A little softer.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with the sentiment, but I also agree with, we don't want to be changes every year. So I think in some ways less is more. So if we could say it very succinctly, maybe, but I don't think we want to put every little detail in. It's gonna be kind of hard.
I could go either way on whether we include that phrase.
If I may, the words but not participate in debate, that in the context of all things is just a eroding statement, Because
It's a what?
it could be eroding because asking questions could be participating in debate, injecting certain statements based on reference to prior decision making, that may be participating in debate. So I would actually just strike that because I think that muddies the water.
I'm neutral on that. I don't take it that way, but I'm fine striking it, so.
Okay, any other thoughts on 2.8 before we go to 2.2?
No,
Okay, so let's go to 2.2 here. And let's see. Committee member Binker actually wanted to hear perspective on this. So maybe if you guys can just, for those that want to, share your thoughts about this, and then we can ask questions and comments as you guys go on. So anyone have any thoughts about 2.2?
Excuse me, just before we move forward, just the last sentence in 2.8 doesn't sound flexible enough to allow the liaison to not attend a meeting if they're not able to, for some reason. Saying
What was that?
Well, the liaison shall attend commission meetings
how about
as
is
requested by the
expected?
body.
We could change shall to is expected too.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for your thoughtfulness.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay, so let's go to 2.2. Any of the board commission?
I have one question just on the mechanism. So as I read this, it's okay for any city council member to speak with any commission member to quote, clarify a position taken by the board. I don't know if that is only positions that have already been taken or positions that are coming up on the agenda. Because I have a big concern about individual council members talking to individual commission members ahead of, it's sort of the inverse, I guess, of what we were just talking about, where we don't want to influence during a meeting. We don't want the liaison during a meeting to influence the commission, but even more so don't want them influencing them outside of an agendized meeting.
Yeah, so I think we can, I mean, I read it as past when I see taken, but we could certainly insert previously taken to make that clear. I wanted to hear more about this, though. Some of you already touched on it and some of you haven't, because, if there were, I guess you would just go through your liaison, but then even if you did that, let's say you had a question coming up in a meeting and just were curious about something that had happened at council or wanted to ask a council member something. I mean, this is more about us lobbying you, but if you reach out to us, is it okay to talk about it? I just wanted to hear you think out loud a little more along the lines that Chair Siegel has been doing. I'm curious if others of you agree with that there should just basically be nothing except sort of formal and in terms of contact with council members about particular policies.
I actually think it's helpful. And that's the reason why I think the language should be a resource, because many of us are, these are volunteering positions. We have not received training. We don't necessarily have clear guidance as to exactly the level of authority or responsibilities we have. Oftentimes when we're making a decision, and I've asked this for the staff, and this is how the staff supports us, what are the framework under which we're making a decision? What are the guidelines? And so I think it's really helpful to have the city council liaison as a support, as a reference point to understand the context in which we're making decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be really helpful. I do have a comment for section 2.2, the second sentence. Instead of the word to clarify, because it's confusing for me, who is making the clarification?
Mhm.
Is it just a purpose for the liaison to understand a decision? If so, then, they can, if they're just visiting and approaching the commission to understand better how a decision is made, we're happy to clarify.
Yeah, I think the question is, so let's say, well, let's take the example we've been working with of UAC and SCAP. If I was getting ready for an SCAP meeting and I was like, oh, I'm looking at the UAC, I was curious what the UAC did and I'm reading the thing and I don't get it, I'm confused. Can I reach out to a member of UAC or do I have to reach out to Ed who reaches out to them, or how does that work? Or and if that would feel, so I think that's what this is getting at, is that a council member, because we're not limited to the liaison here, but the non-liaison council member, is it okay? Does it feel comfortable for a council member to contact a board or commission member to clarify something you've already done? To just say, hey, does this mean X? I think it means X, or does it mean X plus 1? Is that awkward for you? Because we
Yeah,
can.
I guess it would just 2 clarifications, especially based on Chair Chen's comments, is one, this is one direction communication. I think this isn't supposed to be any kind of limit. Well, it's not even in our handbook, but to limit the commission members from reaching out to understand something from council. You're our council members, right? It's the other way around, just to make sure it's only that. And then I think there's a really big distinction between what's already happened, understanding it, and upcoming meetings. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, you raise a good point because it is helpful to have that dialogue. But I've just, it's happened a couple of times now in the UAC where a commissioner has spoken to a council member who's really got a policy perspective that they want to influence. And I don't find that appropriate.
No, that's what this is trying to prevent.
So here, the 2 sentences, the first one is exactly what you're talking about, and this is all about us talking to you. So it's saying, we shall not try to influence something, to lobby you on perhaps on a particular perspective. So presumably lobbying means to get impact in the future. And then the second one is, but we can contact you and say, what exactly is it you did? I'm not clear on, the Papsc rule or the.
Maybe it just needs already, like, to discuss or clarify, and maybe clarify is not the right word, but a position already taken by the board or commission.
Yeah, I would just say
yeah, either.
I'm kind of okay with it the way it is. I think it's important to maintain the independence of the commission, and I think that the first sentence is focused on that. But I think trying to, I mean, we want to be able to have open dialogue. Press about a situation, and the council member wants to contact a commission member, say, hey, what's happening on this? Like they assume the commission member is going to be more tuned into what's going on and have the details on the information, be able to clarify what the status is on this.
I like that. And I think status is a little different than clarifying positions. And as you were talking, I was thinking I'd like to add that. And that's what you just said. I think if we could contact you in order to clarify a position taken or status of an issue, status of consideration of an issue by the board or commission, because, for example, since we're in public, after our e-bikes thing, I think something was going back to Parks and Rec, and at some point I'd love to know what's going on there. I don't know what's going on. I'd like to ask without lobbying. I think that's okay. Or I could go through the liaison, I suppose, to ask, or staff, but that just seems bulky.
It's too cumbersome.
Yeah, I'd much rather be able to call, as long as I'm not saying, and here's what you should do. Okay, so I think to the clerk, in order to clarify position taken, or the status of addressing an issue, what's the best way to say? That's awkward.
I think you just want to put it after, so a position taken by the board or commission, or the status of an ongoing matter or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe just to clarify status or a position taken.
Yeah.
I'm still having concerns with the word clarifying because clarifying is an open verb from my understanding.
It's a what verb?
In my mind, it's open. So who's clarifying what? Who is who is doing the clarifying? Right? So if it's the city council member trying to understand.
Yeah, understand, better understand. That's okay. To better understand a position taken by the board or commission.
Okay, I think that's pretty good.
The only thing here is that on the status of an ongoing matter shifts that second sentence from being not just ex post facto. So the first sentence was before anything, council can't lobby. The second sentence was after they can inquire about a position already taken. But now it's also about a matter that might even come back to council.
It is.
So
So I think, so now the first sentence is what we shouldn't do, and the second sentence is what's okay to do.
Yeah.
And so we can understand what they've done, and we can ask about the status of what they're doing. I think those are okay things. There is a sort of an odd one-way street that I think is what we're all driving toward. I just want to say it to make sure we're all aligned. That commissioners could reach out to us, but we should not reach out to you unless we're asking about what you've already done or just the status, procedurally. Is that where we are? So what's odd, though, is if you reach out to us and ask a question, could that question be, what do you think about policy X? Then are we lobbying if we respond? Should we, it seems like that's a weird loophole. So either we should say that should not be a question asked, or.
You're providing perspective that's good, that it's a fine line in independence, but it's also helping to be productive.
Okay, so
Potentially.
and I just want to make sure that people are comfortable with that. So if it's solicited, one can, in essence, lobby, but we can't do unsolicited. I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure we know what we're saying.
So should the first sentence, it is inappropriate for council member to contact. So if you remove to contact, it is inappropriate for a council member to lobby a board or commission on behalf of. So to lobby, meaning that the lobbying could happen whether or not it got started by the council member contacting the
That's my point.
commission.
But I think that I'm hearing a split of opinion on that. Because I think some of you are saying, yeah, I'd like to know what they think if I ask. And I don't know if our deputy city manager has some angst over that. Do you want to share any concerns?
I think you all are moving towards the direction of what I'm thinking of. It needs to be a very intentional decision of what you're trying to do. I think, to her point, if you remove the to contact, it's just a blanket statement that you're not lobbying a board or commission, period, whether you solicit, whether you offer it or they solicit it. I think that's a policy decision that you will definitely want to be clear to the council of what you're recommending. Right now, it sounds like it's you can't initiate it.
That's exactly my point. Thank you for articulating that very well.
And I would prefer to see it stay the way it was. And I would like to be able to ask a council member if they would advocate for a particular policy perspective.
I also can envision situations where I might want to ask
Mhm.
and would like the flexibility.
which also means you don't have to listen to it. I mean, if you hear
Yeah.
that person's argument, that
Yes.
council member's argument, you could say, thank you for your opinion.
So leaving it as it is makes it that it's your discretion. If you're curious what someone thinks, you can ask, but we can't come and strong arm you and call you up and say, hey, we really think you ought to do this, da, da, da. It sounds like that's at least 3 in front of me. I don't know if Mr. Smith, Chair Smith is still with us. No, okay. So we may not have unanimity on that, but it does seem to be the sense of the group in front of us.
I kind of look at it as like a power thing, right? If council who has more power solicits us, that puts us in a very different position than if we say, hey, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else that we should say on 2.2? Otherwise, would one of you guys like to make a motion to adopt?
And it would be a recommendation
Yeah,
to the
recommendation.
city council.
Yep.
Any other comments from the experts? It was really very helpful.
Only one little comment on 2.8, it should say attend committee, commission, or board meetings. Yeah.
I'm happy to move the recommendation to council on these 2 changes.
And then there's also the Stormwater Committee. That's why we have BCCs.
That's a really good clarification. In the procedures and protocols, it typically says board or commission, but
All over the
we
place.
typically write it as board, commission, and committee,
Ah.
which captures most.
All right. Well,
Okay, well, maybe that's one that we'll let staff kind of fix.
on it.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, a second. Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, does the maker or seconder want to say anything about this?
No, I don't think so. I think it's been a very good, helpful discussion.
Okay.
I just want to say thank you because I really didn't know what we were going to hear tonight. And I haven't served on a board or commission, so it's probably most helpful to me to listen to you and from the different types of commissions you serve on. And it seems like there's different cultures and practices and, all of that have grown up within each, but yet there's some through lines on your preferences. And it's just tremendously helpful to me to have you take your time to come help us sort through this. So thank you.
Yes, thank you guys as well. Okay, does the clerk want to call the vote?
Chair Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Lowry,
Yes.
Councilmember Vinker.
Yes.
The motion carries 3-0.
Can I
Okay.
just ask parenthetically with this body in front of us, without taking too long, and it's not quite agendized, but it's related to this, which is, what do you feel about these work plans? I know they take a lot of time. And, that's something else that we could have this body take a look at if you would like us to.
I'd be happy to start on that. Overall, I think the work plans are worthwhile. I think they provide a historical record on the work of a commission, particularly when you add your results from the previous year's work plan. I think there's some significant problems right now in the timing of the appointments of new BCC members and when work plans are due. I've had discussions with council members and with the city clerk about this, but just to give you a quick example of what's happened on the Parks and Recreation Commission. Parks and Rec meets once a month. We meet on the 4th Tuesday of each month. And so in terms of iterations to create a work plan, it's once a month, although when we have our reorganization meeting and appoint a new chair and vice chair, we'll look to have a retreat sometime as an additional meeting during the month. Looking at trying to get the work plan done this last cycle, I had advocated to have the commission appointments be completed by the end of March. This is really the time. If you want a work plan submitted by the end of May for city council to approve in June, that's kind of a minimum timeline that's required. That gives us a March meeting to have a reorganization. That gives us a early April to have a retreat where we'll kind of start working on our work plan. The way that our commission does it is each of the ad hocs we create basically turns into a work plan item. And then there would be then there would be 2 meetings that would be available to be able to create the work plan. This past year, this past cycle, our appointments actually didn't happen in late April. They didn't happen until early May. So we ended up delaying our April meeting to the first week of May in hopes that any potentially new appointed commissioners would be able to attend. There was a new appointed commissioner who wasn't able to attend the meeting the next day after they were appointed. They were out of town. And then we had our retreat 2 weeks later, and then we had our commission meeting 2 weeks later where we had to finalize our work plan. That was a pretty aggressive timeline.
So you had to finish your annual plan in 3 months, right? Once you started executing on it, because you only have 3 months left of the year and this thing starts again. So
No, we're basically our work plan cycle is roughly the fiscal year of the city in alignment with the fiscal year. So it gets approved by city council in June. And the timing's off a little bit. We're going to start working on it when the cycle starts. But if we could get the appointments done by the end of March, that would really help.
yeah, so timing's off.
And I recognize it's difficult with city council, with the new council starting up. And then having to make the appointments right off the bat.
Other chairs with opinions?
I would say the first couple of years were very painful, particularly when it was an Excel spreadsheet format and we didn't really understand how to complete them. Now, I think we have a couple of them under our belt, so we're more able to update it. But the Public Art Commission this year was lucky in that we didn't have to reconstitute the commission. So we had our work plan ahead of time and we were able to put it together. But this really was a 2-people effort. And then we kind of brought it to the commission for everybody to review, get input, and then update it again. So, I mean, I think maybe from a record keeping standpoint, it's helpful. With the rhythm, we can continue to generate this. But, I think it's a work in progress.
So I joined actually after the system was already in place, so I haven't experienced, an alternative. But I would say that it has been easy to learn as somebody who has, come in under this way of doing things. It does, it makes sense. And, has been something that our board has been able to accomplish with, relatively few problems.
I would just underscore the timing. I mean, we did not even have a quorum until we had 4 people rolling off because we had someone moving. So we didn't have a quorum. So it was really challenging timing wise. And then the only other thing, I think we're a little bit anomalous because we have such a large mandate that the work plan is many, many pages. And so it in a way, it ends up not being that helpful because it's just so big. But I don't know that you want to use us as the example to decide going forward. But the timing issue is tricky for sure. And one way we've addressed that is, I think, the same as, I forgot which, art commission maybe, where we had, in the past, it was the chair and vice chair who worked on it together ahead of time and then brought a sort of stronger rough draft to the commission. We didn't have a vice chair, and I was just staying on as chair until it was, reappointed, but we just had a super awkward situation.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we are done with action item 2. Thank you guys again for all your work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity.
And then now we're on to future meeting and agendas. So maybe we could start off with just my colleagues. What's your guys' thoughts about it's kind of relatively light agenda in my opinion, but I'd love to get your guys' thoughts and the meeting so far, and also maybe from staff about future meetings coming up.
I think staff's the right place to start because they know what's backed up. All I know about is leaf blowers and all that good stuff. And then whatever's left on this last agenda item of, we might be done with that now, are we?
Almost, I think.
You mean done with the referrals?
Yes.
You're getting there. You all have the international travel that we are due to draft language for you and bring that back, but I'm assuming that'll be relatively quick because we are just taking your recommendations. You have the censure language to still speak about. That one has not yet been brought to the committee.
That's on the city attorney's inbox.
Yes, so that one and the international travel, and there's one other one that is not coming to my mind right now. We have a to-do as staff to give you some language or give you some comparison points. So the censure one is one of those. So our plan is to be able to bring that back in August. We think we'll be able to have some information for you to look at for your August meeting.
I just want to say thank you for that because one of the things I was wondering about for tonight was what best practices might be on the lobbying section 2.2. And so I was sort of looking around trying to find if the Cal cities or somebody had something or what other cities were doing. Turned out that because our chairs felt pretty strongly and uniformly that what our policy is the one they prefer, didn't really matter. But I do appreciate the work to find out what's going on in other cities on the censure language, because I think that's informative and instructive.
Yeah, I definitely also appreciate when staff kind of has comparison to, other municipalities near us, whether it's on this or other things. So I agree with that comment.
Do we know where the leaf? There's
I have an
other
estimate.
equipment like that. So there's some categorization that has to be done.
Yes, and I'm recalling that the staff working on that is balancing it amongst the other council priority information. So I'll touch base. I do recall it's on their work plan.
I think Director Late said in response to a question that he was coming forth already with just leaf blowers, and then we had the rest of it to do. I think that's the status of that item.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'll follow up.
Okay, great. Anything else that we should talk about in terms of future meeting and agendas?
Well, I mean,
Well,
go ahead.
You started first. So.
Well, I was just going to ask the chair, because you've been on PNS before and neither Councilmember Lowing nor I have. Are there topics or categories, buckets of items that you typically have seen in the past that we haven't seen this year that you would think we should?
I think this is kind of like the usual kind of stuff, so I don't think there's a whole lot. There are a lot of things I would love for us to actually talk about more, which is just about meeting efficiencies. I think that's really important. I mean, I think this meeting is pretty short, so we don't have to worry about it too much, but our council meetings definitely, I think, would love to see more there. But, this is kind of like par for the course. There's not, sometimes there's really controversial things, but, generally this is kind of like it.
I was going to say that at some point, we need to figure out a way to make some adjustments to that work plan schedule. We could just informally, tell the mayor and vice next year that, we just need to adjust that schedule and we can just do it without all kinds of votes and stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, or we can adjust our commission appointments to be earlier to provide quorums and things.
Yeah, as you remember, this year they were later than later because we had so many that we had to push people out. So
Yeah, I do. And because UIC was shorthanded, we put them in the earlier group.
I mean, or even things like maybe they should do a 2-year work plan because, they take 3 months to get it together or 4. And there's some changes and some of those projects by definition on all the work plans can't get done that year. So maybe that would be the thing to do, be cutting the workload in half. So we could ask for a referral on that if you wanted to, or just, they're done now. We could wait a few months on that.
If we have bandwidth in the fall, that makes sense. My memory, though, is that our docket, our agenda gets more full as the year progresses. Is that right? It's sort of backloaded, so we may not have a lot of spare time.
I
but-
think the situation takes staff time to do some of the stuff, so,
Mhm.
it-
Yep.
yeah. Okay, guys, well, thank you so much for your work on this, and we are now adjourned.